Alien Week is here. This is an evergreen video. If you're hearing this after the fact, it is still valid all the way through IAE for late 2023. Thank you for sticking around to my long subscribers. Let's get right into it. I'm going to cover 3 ships. This is my 3rd attempt at this recording because I was kind of trying to figure out how I want to cover this. I don't want to do a full video just diving into the sale. I want to talk about like where these ships are, where I think they're going to go, and if the value is going to hold about the same or it's going to go up, which, I mean, alien ships don't go down. So let's talk about that. As a reminder, during Alien Week, just a quick Alien Week rundown, you only get 6-month insurance if you purchase these ships outright. The better way to handle that is through CCUs. I'll include a video at the end cards that explains how the CCU process works, but in general, just understand that you take a ship that's worth less than what the ship you want is, you purchase a CCU through credits or through war bond, which means new money, and then you are able to apply that. And specifically, let's start with the Banu Defender. So the Banu Defender has a 20 USD reduction based on if you go with the war bond variant, which is 200 USD versus 220 USD on the credit version. And as a reminder, if you apply the CCU, it will carry the insurance of the smaller ship. So if you just picked up a Fury in the last sale, you can get LTI on a alien class and an alien vessel. And that's not the only way to get good insurance. As a reminder, IAE, the massive sale that has every single ship in the game, within reason, has 10-year insurance. And that's not bad at all either, because that doesn't start now. It starts at the beginning, after alpha, after beta, into the regular game. So, Defender. Defender's in a weird position. Its main armaments are alien, naturally. And I've said before that this ship is a wonderful ship for 1 to 2 players, especially if you have like a family member or a good friend that doesn't play that often, who just wants to hop in and see what's up. They get their own cockpit there because there's 2 cockpits that are running next to each other. And basically there's a set of stairs. One of the things that's very valuable about all that, and the reason I describe it that way, is because there's a space between those stairs and those cockpits that has 2 beds. It also allows you to basically put boxes on the floor in there, at least as of now, and you can fly around and do box runs with the Defender. It's a very overpriced vessel for such a job, but it's there, and it's a nice little bit of utility. Ships that are fighters where you just jump into the cockpit and there's an animation and your character hops in, right now they're in a weak position because you can't just put stuff in there. Another example is if you want to do some light FPS work or you're just helping a buddy out and they give you some free stuff like, hey, I found this on my last mission, here you go. And you want to just grab, you know, a set of armor or something like that. You can't just grab that and then go into a light fighter unless you can fit it on your person, which is not exactly easily said, better said than done. And also the storage of a light fighter, the ones that have it and it's reliable, unfortunately, it's very small. Being able to physically walk up a set of stairs and just chuck that stuff in is very, very useful. Now, there's a lot of other ships that have that. I just wanted to point that out, that this is a nice ship for those reasons. Its weapon systems are still, unfortunately, dependent on server FPS being good. It's gotten better over time, but this ship does need another pass. The ship is beautiful. It has a unique quantum drive mechanism it's well worth seeing, and it doesn't get old. And I can't wait to see the Banu Merchantman, which also has that Banu quantum system, to kick this in. Let me just say, I'm assuming it would have it because it is the way they make these ships, how they handle their quantum. But I don't know for certain. We haven't seen an example of the Banu Merchantman in quantum yet, recently anyway. So the Defender is in like a unique spot. It also has speaking of unique, a role that is well suited to handling work with the BMM. So when that is out in the future, this ship will be very nice. It's also a loaner for the BMM. So if you somehow are blessed enough to have a BMM already, it might not be worth getting another one of these unless you really, really need it. Because remember, if you have one of these ships, the loaners don't like stack, basically. So just keep that in the back of your mind as well. So for somebody who's starting out, I absolutely could see you just kind of upgrading to this and enjoying it and having a great time. And especially if you fly with an workmate or two, or once in a while have a friend who wants to hop on, it's not going to treat you wrong. And once again, the crab ship is quite nice. I think they will improve its weaponry reliability over time, and that's something to be. It is something worth mentioning, just so you understand all the cards on the table. But I think that Defender will rise in value once they finally get around to giving it a pass, especially when the BMM is out, if that special relationship they originally touted is in there. There have been theories about the BMM sharing shields with the Defender, or sharing a tactical weapon link with it. So if you have a BMM and that has its advanced large or even capital class radar, depending on how they end up working it out. Right now I think it's large, but who knows in the future, because it is a cap ship. If they start resizing the radars for that class of ship, being able to give it longer range radar information, beaming it over, would also be a great way to help that ship do its job. If they have some type of unique relationship between the BMM and the Defender where they kind of are symbiotic, it would make it extremely valuable and suddenly one of the best-selling ships in the game, because you don't get one for free with the BMM. Just because it's a loaner does not mean you get one for free. And it is designed to fit in the hangar of the BMM, so it's naturally going to be very popular with people who have one. The BMM is also an excellent selling ship. It was a very affordable cap ship, or quasi-cap, technically, just to be fair, depending on how you look at what a cap ship is. And I'm not going to wade into that whole topic of trotting out how many services it has and what CIG has said which time. But it's a very, very large ship. And it's a large class ship that barely fits on the large pads, and it brings a wealth of services to it. And it's going to be very exciting, and a lot of people will show that excitement, I think, with purchases of Defenders. And I think the Defender will be very popular. So, on to the Blade. So this is our second friend in the sales. And honestly, to me, the Blade is a ship that really needs to have a place. Right now, it's pretty weak. It is a light fighter as well, as ones that you could more commonly think of, like the Gladius, is a good ship to kind of compare this to. And unfortunately, right now, it's in a weak spot, whereas before it was not. It was in an overwhelmingly strong spot. With master modes, we just don't know where this thing's going to lie. And for Warbond 250 USD and for 275 for the credit variant, so that means there's a 25 drop in the Warbond. It seems that you're going to plink down a lot of cash, and I don't think it's worth it right now, unless you really are into exotic and alien vessels and you have a bunch of other stuff already. And one of the reasons I also want to point that out is the Blade doesn't really have an interior to speak of. So it's neat, but it is a Vanduul craft, and it's not as difficult to get as some of the others, or it's expensive. But I don't see a place for this right now. I could eat my words with master modes, because we just don't know where that's going to fall. If you haven't been following master modes, there's a big push through Yogi and his team over with CIG over there, basically pushing for this idea of slowing down the time to kill and making fights last longer, and literally slowing the fights down. And that is absolutely going to happen. There is not like a debate. It's not like, oh, CIG. It's more of just a debate of how slow things are going to get, and how limited is going to be the damage potential against bigger ships. As a reminder, armor scales. So if you have a large ship and you only have size 2 or 1 weaponry, it's barely going to do anything to it except at like really critical spots. Like you might be able to pop an engine, but basically the ship itself will still just kind of the size 1s will just ping off of it. Other than that. And you still have to get through shields too. So if you're not using ballistics, and ballistics have limited ammo, you might not do very little to nothing to an enemy ship. The Blade is in a weird position where it's kind of well equipped, but it's very, very easy to blow it up. And I think that its use of speed in the light fighter category, much like the Gladius, certainly puts it in a difficult position, because if it gets extremely nerfed on its speed, it was the one thing going for it. It is suddenly just it's not going to be able to put all that damage on target because it gets blown up constantly. Now the I you know we have to have some confidence in CIG that they are going to try to balance the light fighters the best they can. And obviously some ships can be weak right now and they could get strong later, and vice versa. They might go back to strength later, even if they get nerfed. But we are talking about, if you count the credit variant, 270 USD for something I keep going back to compare to the Gladius, which is 90 USD. It is extremely hard, especially if your budget is not some very specific thing and you're not really into these ships, to justify all of that credit tied up in such a ship. Additionally, for this price bracket, you could look at a Connie Andromeda. A Constellation Andromeda is in the same price bracket as just the Blade. You could get a Raelin. Yeah, I mean, like, so obviously these aren't fair examples. Like, although to be fair, the Andromeda has a lot of weaponry, so and it could certainly uh, scare off a Blade, or just literally just blow it out of the sky if it got lucky. Once again, master modes could change everything, but the Blade is in a very difficult place, especially with it being a light fighter with master modes. Another issue that they have is that you're going to have to turn your shields off to move around and get into more functionally maneuverable positions. And suddenly you're in a light fighter that is most of your budget of your fleet, if you don't have a huge fleet. And you're in an alien craft that eventually you're going to need to find parts to repair that ship that are rare, modules that are rare, weaponry that is rare. Um, the replacement time on this is going to get longer and longer and longer. There's only so many replicas made of Vanduul ships. And one of the other problems I can see with this vessel is that the repairs could jump in price because of the difficulty to source the modules, components, and parts that make up this ship. Now, that's also, once again, another piece of moving targets in this game, because CIG could just keep things simple. You could just fly up and hit the repair button, and if it doesn't have a component that's literally blown off of the ship, or a weapon system that's literally blown off the ship, then you might be okay. But the Blade has the problem of some of its systems are on its wings, especially its weaponry. So when those get blown off, well, they're gone. So I just don't see this ship as something practical. I do think this ship has a vital purpose, though, interestingly. I see the Blade as a very useful Op4 ship. What I mean by that is, for organizations that are truly maybe at a scale of 15 to 20 players, a single blade, or maybe two blades, would be an excellent way to train your players on how to handle these enemy ships, especially if you go taking them on the PTU, where it won't sting as much when these keep getting destroyed. If you're playing full contact football, so to speak. So these blades, I think, would be a great way to train up new org mates on how to handle Vanduul incursions in the future. And to a lesser extent, now that I'm thinking about it, they should play a great role in Arena Commander. But I just once again, I just don't see it as a viable thing for most players. I see it as a niche item that is a true collector's piece, bragging rights piece, and once again, as a training tool for organizations in limited circumstances, in their own ways. And I do agree that the AI is not going to be as good as a competent pilot, especially somebody who's really got some stick time that can really put people through their paces trying to fight against it. For those old school jet people, this is like an F5 with a big red star painted on the back. So if you want to think of this as something that can be used in those ways, or maybe just something to familiarize yourself with the Vanduul, and you have the budget or the credit to do this, it was going to be interesting. But I just caution you strongly and look carefully at your options. I mean, even in the org, just the org framework, I'm just thinking of org minded now, in that just a little bit more, you could get yourself an Aquila, which has the advanced scanning packages for exploration in the future, or a mole, which can get people, it's a credit printing machine. With you can put that up with 4 people, including yourself, and now all of a sudden all your org mates can make all the money they want as long as they can tolerate mining. And it's got serious mining on board, and even crunches the org down and compresses it so you can stay out there longer. Wonderful vessels for different reasons. And the mole's good now, and it will continue to be good. And the Constellation Aquila will slowly beach into its role. I was just chatting on a Discord with folks about the Connie series, and especially we came to the conclusion the Aquila and the Andromeda both could use the same style and design as the Phoenix, so the bottom area being smaller and taking up more space with the main areas. But for the Aquila and the Andromeda, the idea would be that more of that area would be taken up by crew quarters and having maybe some basic services for the needs of their roles. The Andromeda, for example, having more weapon access, and the Aquila being more geared towards exploration. So maybe having small suit lockers and weapon racks that are even more so than what we've already seen weapon racks wise. And of course, having, dare I say it, this is heresy, I think, a small medical station of some sort. Maybe not a full med bed, but it would be nice to see something else. Because we already have sustainable food and drink technically on those Connies, and they are due up for a pass. As a reminder, with the commitment that CIG has put on RSI quasi-caps and caps, we have this situation where eventually the Connie series will probably benefit from those. We don't know how much yet, but the Connies are going to need a lot of changes. The components need to have new housings. There needs to be a complete redesign of their floors. But at least there's some good ideas out there, like sighting the Phoenix, like looking at these larger ships and maybe scaling some of their technologies down and their ideas down for the component sizings of the Connies, and also looking pretty hard at those. I think the one that's going to have the least work done on it would be the Taurus. And that's not to pick on that, but I just think that ship actually did a good job for what it is, and I don't want to see its price go up too much, because I keep recommending that ship to a lot of people who are very utility focused, and they want to be able to have a limited budget spent on that ship, and then have other things like an ROC, have different types of. So having options is the important part here, without drifting off too far. Our final of the 3 different war bond discounted ships is the Banu Merchantman. The Merchantman is clocking in at a hefty 650 still on credit, and 600 USD for the war bond edition. Now, that's a huge drop, and I think this is signaled because of the changes that we saw in the priorities. Literally right before Alien Week, we had it telegraphed to us that the BMM is not going to be in active production at the moment. They kind of put it on hiatus to focus on a bunch of RSI ships. So remember that if you are picking this ship up, you're picking it up because of its loaners and because of its long-term hold potential. So the idea being that when this ship finally does go back into production and it is seen, it will be glorious for what you need. Remember, this ship has grown significantly in the past few years. It does have all the services it was promised, but in order to do those things and still have AI pathing, the hallways are very big. Also, the Banu themselves are pretty tall. So this ship has a lot of space that you may not appreciate as much as you think you do. Look carefully at the videos covering the Banu Merchantman. I'll put one in the final cards, and that video of mine also has in the links the original video I watched, the entire thing. You can also just go onto the StarCitizen official YouTube and follow there and check out, like if you type in the merchantmen, it will come right up. Sometimes when they talk about the merchantmen, they say the Banu merchantmen or the BMM, just like we do. And once in a while, they just stick to the word merchantmen because that seems to be the new sale tag, the new SKU, so to speak, for this ship. Where do I think this falls into value wise? I still think it's a fantastic value if you are willing to wait. And I will say that the ship loaner matrix, which I'll have linked below in this video's description, it is getting kind of long in the tooth. I think they need to not just give some ships passes that really could use them. I think they also need a lot of new blood added to these loaner lists. And the merchantman is really no exception. Right now, it's still the Defender and the C2 Herc, which is a nice combo. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, if you actually add it up, especially because of how much the Defender cost, it's not too bad as a trade-off. But it may still not be worth applying a CCU to get those loaners unless you really need those loaners. Remember, if you already have the ship, you can't stack loaners. Just remember that. So if you have that loaner through another ship, it is not worth having both ships, and then you're not going to get two loaners out of it. So if you do have, when you start getting into this class of ships, you might have some crossover. That being said, the Herc C2, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a solid ship. Up until recently, it was one of the biggest haulers in the game, and it's still a versatile, great ship, great for orgs, great for personal use, and it is what it is. The Defender I covered earlier, great ship, wonderful ship. I think that the bigger problem for many is going to be seeing the final result of the BMM and how much it has changed since the original concepting. It is not a sleek trading ship that's going to narrowly go through places. It is a extremely well-equipped combat vessel that happens to have a mall with a courtyard in it. Balconies in it. It has a massive cargo hold that takes up a lot of space. Cavernous cargo hold. That in a video recently, I mentioned how you could put an army of Furies in just the cargo hold alone, and you'd still be able to carry a bunch of stuff. And then also an entire hangar that can fit a Defender plus a little bit more. And it's got docking collars with gantries and walkaways and such that go across the entirety of the base of the ship. It's got trading rooms. It has services that you would expect on capital ships. So just keep in the back of your mind the scale of this vessel. It is going to be interesting to fly. It is going to feel like a cap vessel. And when you go to fuel it up, it's going to feel like a cap vessel. And when you go to fix it, it's going to have the alien tax, because the BMM stuff is going to be by far, we have yet to see an alien vessel of this scale and complexity. And even just if it's just a simple repair with UEC type thing, the repairs are going to be costly. There's literally gold inlaid on the walls, or at least simulated, in the trade rooms and such. And also, some of the rooms you may not appreciate. The crew quarters has an entire basking pool designed to like have a communal bath in. There is a religious services room, or a cultural room, I guess you could call it, at the top of the vessel. These are things that are for meditation. These are things that take up space. And there is kind of a tale of two ships here. If you're not a fan of the 890 jump, you're especially not going to be a fan of the Merchantman unless you are willing to overlook all of those interior design choices for its benefits. Which also, by the way, is what the problem is with the Starfarer. The Starfarer and the Starfarer Gemini, on paper, are amazing vessels. The problem is when you actually try to fly one and do day-to-day operations in it, it's a nightmare to try to get through the chutes and ladders of that dang ship and all the glitchiness of that ship. And the fact that all this stuff you're running past is not usable. It desperately needs a pass. And it definitely feels like the entire ship was built to be an FPS map. Because it was. They literally said that. So, I see the BMM having both of these problems. The tale of two ships is when you have wonderful crew quarters, a battle bridge, 40 weapon, or I'll say 30 or so weapon armory in the hallway there. Enough space to fit a decent sized vehicle in the bottom of the ship and a full hangar that can fit a medium class ship or two small ships more precisely without breaking stuff, all in the same floor. And then the rest of the ship is like a pool. The rest of the ship is a spa. The rest of the ship has an entire restaurant. Like the 890 jump has a problem where it's like an identity crisis. And also in the crew quarters, you also have the medical, by the way. The ship has like a tale of two ships going on, where the one deck is incredibly useful and powerful. And especially if you don't really think about the VIP habs or VIP nature of the ship, if I could just have that one floor with the hangar bolted to the front, it would look really silly looking, but boy, would that be an effective ship. And hauling the rest of that ship around is a shame. Okay, maybe the turrets too, to be fair, but they next to the hangar. So, and because the ship is so large, it needs to have much bigger landing gear that takes up a ton of space on the front. And because the ship is so large, it's a bigger silhouette and a bigger target and a bigger juicy thing for pirates to look at. And unfortunately, it doesn't really, on at least as the essences of the ship, doesn't need to be. The engines and all the components are sitting down below, right on the decks I'm describing, and this sub-engineering deck that's like half a deck underneath that, to be fair. So I would say about 50% of the 890 jump is waste. That's the whole point. It's supposed to be grandiose and amazing. The Merchantman, to me, I hope it doesn't have too much wasted space, because it can't afford to be grandiose just for the sake of being grandiose. It needs to have an entire solely running it, a family of Banu running it that are all from the same guild, and it needs to be able to move place to place effectively and for a profit, which is above all else what they really value. They build trade relationships to make money, and they will do a lot to make sure they keep making that money. So having their ships as really impressive, at least to newcomers, makes sense, but within reason. So I don't think they're going to change the Merchantman that much from what the most recent videos we saw right before they pulled it out of production and they started refocusing on the RSI, quasi-caps and cap ship. In particular, the Polaris is going to be the kind of the bellwether for how that's doing. I do see the Merchantman as a great investment long term, but within years it might take to actually see it sitting in game, sitting in your hangar where you can fit it up and bring your friends along and your workmates. Also, one other thing, to me, the speed of development on ships like the Polaris, on the Perseus, on the Nautilus, to me, are signs of how quickly other ships will start getting into development. These much larger ships are extremely exciting, and they take some time. And yes, they describe it as they can move these parts around, but there will need to be custom variant parts to these things. There will need to be some things that are last minute worked out on each one of these ships. And I think that we'll see the speed of how they get these kits done within reason when they develop these new ships. So if by the end of the year, for example, we start seeing some heavy duty stuff on a specific ship that really made it through the pipeline quickly from the RSI side, that would be a massive indication of how quickly we will see the Apollo series, and maybe even a pass for the Connies or something else. This is my speculation now, those two things. And then drifting into back to the alien vessels. Also, a side note, the Banu Merchantman itself is a very popular ship. It has a large amount of support behind it. Sort of like something like a Genesis Starliner being developed. There is very few ships that people want to see more of. So I get that they're trying to get the backlog done as much as possible with this RSI push, but I would not be shocked if they go back to the Merchantman after they've done that. My speculation. This isn't even speculation, but this is the obvious. They need to do a Defender pass. So if you get a bunch of art assets and a bunch of components work done and everything else for the BMM, it stands to reason that at least some of that technology, at least some of that learning, at least some of that design language, and even some of those parts on a small scale can be brought over to the much smaller Defender. That goes without saying. So yeah, and as a side note, if we see us at least even a small pass done on the Defender, that might be a good hint that they're trying to test the waters. They're putting their toe back in the waters on working on the Merchantman, because every single thing in that ship was custom made, as they said. But if they start building more Banu ships or reworking a Banu ship, the only other one we have that we know of, that's an indication of where we're going. All right, I hope this was kind of narrow enough to really stick to the points, and I hope you have a good Alien Week. I hope if you're hearing this after Alien Week that this helped you out. Please drop me a comment if you need some I will value feedback, and if you need specific things you want to talk about. And I know this is a shock, but I do answer every single comment, or at the very least I read them, and even if they're negative and very, very negative, and I don't delete anything and whatnot. I want to create a discourse about these ships and the game we all love, project in general, and I gladly welcome it. Fly safe.